Hello, welcome to this safety orientation. My name is Joe Schmidt. I'm a regional safety coordinator with the Minnesota Municipal Utilities Association, otherwise known as MMUA. Before we get started, you're going to need a pen or pencil and a chunk of paper. Hit pause and go get those things if you need to. I'll wait. Okay, glad you got those items. There's a saying that goes, success is more attitude than aptitude. This can be very easily restated as safety is more attitude than aptitude. In other words, you don't need to know all of the OSHA rules to be safe. Do you even know what OSHA is? Some people don't. Well, first off, it's an acronym. And in today's world with Twitter and texting and all those other things and the limitation of characters you get to use to communicate, we're all very versatile in using acronyms. So let's start with the O. What do you think the O may be talking about? Obvious? Is safety obvious? Sometimes it is very much so obvious. Sometimes it can be very confusing. Thus there are rules and also instructions. Ultimately, it's up to us and what's in each of us, our acceptability of risk, what risks we're willing to accept. How about the S? This is safety training, so absolutely it's safety. All too often we're being told that the safety stuff is stupid. It's so simple, why are we even here? Well, my only response to that is it stupid? I hope that isn't your attitude. Nobody likes to hear this, but yes, safety and salary are kissing cousins. Too many expenses in one account, or workers' compensation insurance, it has to come from another place, and maybe that's salaries. On to the H. It seems when I ask the question about what the H is, it always comes out that it means hazards. Well, the number one rule or regulation OSHA has is called the General Duty Clause. That essentially says that the employer is required to furnish to each employee a place of employment which is free from recognized hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or physical harm. Hazards are directly related to unsafe acts and unsafe conditions. In the picture, is the hazard the penguin with the symbols or the sleeping polar bear? The unsafe act of the symbols, the unsafe condition of the sleeping polar bear. There's a gentleman, his name is Charlie Moorcraft. Charlie has several safety videos out. One of them is titled Remember Charlie. Charlie recounts an accident that he had. Not really an accident, more an incident. Charlie worked for a gasoline blending factory. One day, Charlie went out to a blending plant to change out a valve in the system. Charlie knew through his safety training what the requirements were to perform this task. Charlie chose to take shortcuts, not follow the lockout tagout standard operating procedures. In doing so, this shortcut would cut time down required to accomplish the task. Charlie had done this task numerous times. He knew it, he recognized it, but he was confident in his abilities. He had a lousy attitude toward safety. He would sit during the safety trainings with his sunglasses on, his sleeves rolled up, pretending to pay attention when actually he was trying to take a nap. Well, during this process of changing out the valves, there was some leakage of gasoline and other chemicals. The leaking out of the system created a spill. It created the accumulation of vapors, flammable vapors. The flammable vapors crept out of the building down to where his pickup was. His pickup was left running, another violation of the rules. It was a cold night, so the pickup was left running so it would stay warm. He was only going to be in the building for a short period of time. Pretty soon, the task turned into a bigger issue than what had initially been anticipated. The vapors continued to accumulate and crept further and further down the embankment to the truck, and pretty soon there was a loud explosion. The explosion blew up the truck, it blew up the building, and it burned Charlie. Charlie spent several years in the hospital recovering from the injuries associated with the explosion. Charlie recounts in the video about how this injury affected more than just him. His attitude towards safety was, I know it all, I can do it all, I don't need this safety stuff. And now he gets a divorce because his wife couldn't handle being a part of taking care of him and seeing him in the hospital. His daughter goes from a straight A student to a failing student and attempts suicide, all because she saw her father suffering in the hospital. Safety isn't just what OSHA says it is. It's what we make it to be with our attitude towards things. How about the A? Were you expecting attitude? In each one of us, we are built to accept a certain level of risks in what we do. This phenomenon in us is something that has developed because of our experiences, our education, something we've seen or something we've done. And it changes based upon our own life, whether that's the time or the lifestyle, the circumstances or knowledge, or any other number of factors. What I'm willing to accept is different than what you're willing to accept with regards to risks. So that is the ultimate objective of what we're doing here, is to learn about our acceptability of risk and work within that to remain uninjured, healthy, and to protect the company's assets from damage. Remember, you're one of the company's assets. Really, OSHA is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. This is the federal government. Minnesota has an arm of their Department of Labor and Industry called MinOSHA. Minnesota has this because Minnesota is deemed a state plan state, which means they can have their own safety rules and they can have their own safety regulations. Thus, they govern themselves with regards to safety. One such rule is AWARE. AWARE stands for a Workplace Accident and Injury Reduction Program. Okay, get your pen and paper out, write this down. Where is the AWARE program? That's something you need to ask your supervisor. You need to know where the AWARE program is. In the AWARE program, this is the utilities or the city's ultimate safety and health program. Within it are defined goals and objectives, employee rights and responsibilities are spelled out, employer rights and responsibilities are spelled out. The compliance or the enforcement policy is spelled out. In other words, what happens if you don't follow the rules. How the city or utility is going to safely identify hazards, how they're going to analyze them, and how they're going to control them. The AWARE program also talks about reporting of accidents and investigating such accidents so that they don't occur again. There's also provisions in there to review the program. What safety ultimately is asking us to do is to look at the big picture. We want everybody to know their surroundings, know the coworkers, be prepared, look ahead, know what to do, and not to panic. Minnesota also has what is called the Employee Right to Know program. The Employee Right to Know program is a Minnesota-specific rule. In other words, they have their own rule. There's a federal companion rule called hazard communication. The hazard communication deals specifically with hazardous substances or the chemicals that we work with. Minnesota adds to it harmful physical agents and harmful infectious agents. Got your pen and pencil? You're going to need it. Write this down. Ask the supervisor, where are the safety data sheets? SDS. SDS stands for Safety Data Sheets. Employers must have an inventory of safety data sheets representing the hazardous substances within the city's operations. On the safety data sheets, it spells out all of the pertinent information about that particular product. It's information that you need to know when working with these chemicals. There's also labeling requirements. All containers must be labeled. If we move a chemical, a product, from one container to another container, called secondary container, we must relabel or label that secondary container with information similar to what is contained on the original label. It's your right to know about the hazards associated with those chemicals. Minnesota also includes harmful physical agents. There are 4 physical agents identified: heat, noise, ionizing radiation, and non-ionizing radiation. If there's the foreseeable potential for exposure to one or more of these physical agents to approximate or exceed the permissible exposure level, which is spelled out in the rules, or applicable action level, it's your right to know about the hazards associated with exposure to any one of these physical agents. Again, it's your right to know. We can say, generally speaking, that noise is the most likely physical agent we're going to be exposed to. When a piece of equipment or an environment is so loud that we have to talk beyond a normal level of conversation, we need hearing protection. If a piece of equipment has a pictogram that shows a mannequin with earmuffs on, it means that you must wear hearing protection. Heat is going to come from Mother Nature. Ionizing radiation, non-ionizing radiation is most likely going to come from Mother Nature or from welding. If there's other exposures to any of them, you will be trained upon them. Infectious agents. It's your right to know and receive training on infectious agents which you may be routinely exposed to. The list of infectious agents is listed in the state rules. We can generally say that your work here will not expose you to infectious agents any differently than anybody else in the general public. If there is that potential, you have the right to be trained. A subchapter of the Employee Right to Know program is the Federal Bloodborne Pathogens Program. The bloodborne pathogens that we're working with here are HIV, hepatitis B, and hepatitis C. Of these, which do you think should be your biggest concern? If you said hepatitis C, congratulations. The reason I say that is because there are more carriers for hepatitis C in the United States than there are of hepatitis B and HIV combined. Hepatitis B has a vaccine. HIV and hepatitis C do not. Hepatitis B vaccination, if you have an occupational exposure risk, the employer must offer you the hepatitis B vaccine. Chances are, if you are listening to this, you're in the age category where you've already received the hepatitis B vaccine because you will have needed it to get into kindergarten. HIV is the virus that causes AIDS. If there's a likelihood that you're going to need to clean up or be exposed to a bloodborne pathogen, blood, body fluids, or body parts, we attack them, if you will, with universal precautions. In other words, all blood, all body fluids, and all body parts are considered containing hepatitis B, HIV, and hepatitis C. Rubber gloves are worn whenever we're going to be working with any of those. If something is going to be airborne, we need to put something over our eyes, our nose, and our mouth so that we do not get into contact with them there. Universal precautions. Remember those two words. Got that pen and pencil again? Well, you need it. Here goes. You need to ask your supervisor, what PPE do you need for your job? Who do you get it from? What happens if the PPE gets damaged or worn out or you lose it? Who do you see to get new PPE? Who pays for the PPE? Is there a cost sharing program for safety glasses or safety-toed footwear? Remember when I mentioned that the employer must provide workplace free from hazards? Well, our industry, that is the local government operations such as utilities, public works, are diverse enough that we must use personal protective equipment to address hazards that are out there. These next few pictures are ones that I found on the interwebs, and they're trying to be funny, or at least I think they're funny. But ultimately, what do these people do? They recognized that there was some sort of hazard that they were going to encounter, and they didn't want to get hurt. For each job may require a different level of PPE or a different type of PPE. There are some instances where OSHA mandates that PPE must be used. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. This is what's required by OSHA. And yet there are other instances where the employer must evaluate the job to determine if PPE is required or not. The employer's responsibility is to provide you with PPE. It is your responsibility to use it and to take care of it. When working with personal protective equipment, you need to keep in mind that the hazard hasn't been eliminated. It is still there. It still exists. And without PPE, you're opening yourself up to an injury. The greatest limitation of PPE is that it must be used in order to be effective. And even then, it's a minimal level of protection. With what you've heard about acceptability of risk, and now that we know about PPE, you can see the relationship that ultimately comes down to each person being responsible for their own safety. Again, you need to talk to your supervisor. Again, this picture depicts many things that are not right, other than the recognition that entry into a confined space is hazardous. A confined space is defined as a space that has limited means of entrance and exit and is not designed for constant human occupancy. Manholes, vaults, water towers are the most common in our industry. You need to ask your supervisor about entering these spaces. Write that down. You need to talk to your supervisor about entering confined spaces. The most likely hazard associated with entering into a confined space is lack of oxygen or a hazardous atmosphere. We don't want anybody entering a confined space without the necessary training and protection to do so. Remember being taught to not jam a knife or a fork in the toaster to retrieve a broken piece of toast or a jammed up Pop-Tart without unplugging the toaster first? That was your first lesson in hazardous energy control, or also known as lockout tagout. There are a great number of jobs that you may be required to do on any given day that would require an exposure to hazardous energy, whether that's electrical energy or hydraulic or pneumatic or kinetic or mechanical energy. Every time we expose ourselves to hazardous energy, there is a lockout tagout procedure that must be followed. Pencil and paper. Ask your supervisor about the lockout tagout devices and lockout tagout procedures. Keep in mind the mom equation. The mom equation says if you wouldn't say it or do it or show it to your mom, chances are it's not a good idea to do so with your coworkers or members of the public. There's some hints here about sexual harassment. Keep these things in mind. You don't have to accept being harassed either. You deserve to be treated with respect. If you feel something has happened that you're not comfortable with, speak up, say so, tell your supervisor. Every utility and city has a policy against sexual harassment. Know what that policy is. Ask your supervisor where you may see it. Be nice to your windshield. What does that mean? Almost every single one of you have been raised and come up with using your seatbelt. However, there are people in our industry that don't use seatbelts. That doesn't mean that you take their example and apply it to you. We need to wear seatbelts. It's the Minnesota law that requires them to be worn. There's no exemption for city or utility employees to wear a seatbelt. There are some exceptions, but they're very limited and very narrow, and they don't apply to us. It is the most basic of PPE. Automobile accidents are the #1 cause of fatalities in the workplace. The seatbelt, with its most basic PPE intent, restrains you from being ejected out of or around in the car when it comes to a sudden stop. The unrestrained body can hit the windshield with 16,000 foot-pounds of work when it comes to a sudden stop. The old saying, it's not the fall, it's the sudden stop, applies here, and we'll show you. The following slides are going to compare the velocity of driving at a different speed and coming to an abrupt stop without your seatbelt on, and what it would be when we're free falling from various heights. At 15 miles an hour and you stop suddenly, you hit the wheel, the dashboard, the windshield at the same velocity as if you'd fallen 7.6 feet and landed on it. 7.6 feet. It's about the top of the door of the office or the room that you're sitting in. At 30 miles an hour and you stop instantly, it's as if you had fallen 30 feet and landed on them. Holy Toledo, 30 feet. That's like 4 doors high. At 45 miles an hour, you stop instantly. You're hitting the wheel, the dashboard, the windshield at the same velocity as if you'd fallen 68 feet and landed on them. Okay, now let's move on to 60 miles an hour. You stop instantly at 60 miles an hour. You hit the wheel, the dash, and the windshield at the same velocity as if you'd fallen 121 feet. 121 feet. That's approximately 12 stories. You're going to go wash windows 12 stories up. Do you like that idea? Why not? What's your mind telling you about going up 121 feet in the air? When you're in your car, your immediate surroundings are stationary. It's the outside that's moving. So there's an illusion there. And so we don't have the same sensation as we would when we're going up 121 feet. Go up 121 feet, we wear our fall protection. It's the same difference as if we're wearing or not wearing our seatbelts in our car. Car accidents occur most commonly with distractions that are going on, whether it's the radio or other people in the car with you, or trying to get the air conditioner set right, or trying to get yourself all prettied up for your date tonight, or that damn cell phone keeps going off. Remember, safety isn't always in the regulations and the rules. Plan ahead. Do things right the first time. Many of us must participate in a job briefing on a daily basis. This is the planning ahead stage. Use it to our benefit. Minnesota also has a law or a rule that states that all employers must have workers' compensation insurance on their employees. Minnesota's workers' compensation insurance program is a no-fault workers' comp program. That means if you have an incident at work that results in an injury or an illness directly related to your work, the city and utility has insurance that covers the medical bills associated to it and also a portion of the lost time wages you may have. Even if this is your fault, the insurance covers you. In other words, if you forgot or chose not to wear your hard hat one day and were hit on the head by a tree branch that someone trimmed out of the tree, you're covered. Just like any other insurance, the more that the insurance is used, the more it costs. You have too many car accidents and your insurance premiums go up. You have too many workplace injuries and the workers' compensation insurance goes up. At the beginning, we talked about safety and salary tie-in. Because salaries are the greatest expense category of any organization, when another expense category has an increase due to, in this case, its use, like workers' comp insurance, the dollars must come from somewhere. There's not an unending revenue stream. It may result in wages being stagnated. It may result in open positions being left open. Either way, there's a tie-in between salaries and safety. The League of Minnesota Cities is the city or utilities workers' compensation insurance carrier. You can get more information from your supervisor about where to report an accident. We want all incidents, accidents, property damages to be reported. Do you have any questions? If so, please call me at 218-280-0823 or text me at the same number or send me an email to jschmidt@mmua.org. Thank you.